Okay, we'll get started because we've got a fair bit to cover, and we don't want to overlap into T's achievements. I'm going to be running a basic tanking 101 workshop. We're not going to go into any specifics. I think everybody knows me. I've tanked once or twice, so I got Oz to come along to give me a hand because he claims he tanks every night.
I've never said that.
I like how you said that. Yeah, it's very nice.
Probably got people that have done quite a bit of tanking, and some people have probably not done a lot of tanking. So it really is, as I say, it's a basic 101. I'm not going to go into huge details of any class in particular. We're just going to talk about what is a tank about. I think that would be fair to say, isn't it, Oz?
Yep.
So we're going to start off with a question. What's a tank? What's a tank about? Anybody got any good suggestions?
You're the person that takes the aggro for the team, or the raid team that you're in. You draw all the aggro to you while they do the damage.
The one who tries to piss off the boss the most.
I think those are probably pretty good answers. Yeah. You're trying to sort of get the aggro of the bosses, the ads, and protect all the others in the group, especially your healers. Your healers are going to be your gods, because there's going to be fights. There's going to be a lot of fights where in fairness, you won't take a lot of damage, but there's a lot of fights where you do, and you're going to need those healers, because without them, you're going to die. The other thing I would just say is, the other thing you may have to do is carry out various mechanics in flashpoints and ops, especially things like in hard modes. There's lots of tank swapping and bits and pieces like that go on. Not too many in story mode. A lot of them you can ignore, but yeah, there's just something else you need to be aware of, that you're probably going to be the one person that's got more mechanics to pay attention to than a lot of the people. A good tank needs to be pretty raid aware, very raid aware. You may not know exactly what's going on at any one time throughout the whole raid, but you're going to have a very good idea of the key things and where to position the boss, where to put the group ads, etc., etc. So it's important you've got some raid awareness about things. Also, as the tank, you're going to be the de facto leader of the group. You may not be the raid leader, but you're going to be the person starting the fight pretty much every time, and you want to be doing some sort of countdown to let people know. Unless, of course, you've got sentinels in the group who are going to jump in whatever you do.
Funny.
Or throw their twin saber throw.
Yeah, as you count it down, you watch the sabers go past your left ear. Yeah, you've got a sentinel in the group performing their task to full. Okay, being a good tank. First and foremost, try and learn the fights inside out if you can. Now, that may not be possible if it's your first time tanking a particular boss, particular ad, particular boss. But, if you can, look at the different websites. Delphi ones, she hasn't updated them for a while, but they're certainly pretty much still current for a lot of fights, a lot of ops. And as you learn more about each boss fight, and also the trash mobs, you'll know where to use certain DCTs, as well as knowing where threat drops occur, etc. Because quite a lot of bosses have their own threat drops.
That's the one thing. That's the one thing that always confused me was the DCD.
The defensive cooldown for your class?
Yeah.
Well, the good news is if you're on a Vanguard, you really only have 2, so maybe could argue that you have 3, but Vanguard is probably the most forgiving class as far as that goes. A lot of their cooldowns, if you will, are passive. They're built into your rotation. So by performing your rotation correctly, and all the tanks have that too. You'll get a fair amount of shield and absorb things that pop up on your ability bar. Not your ability bar, but your buff bar. So what I would suggest is if you're, even if you go pull like a gold or a something in a heroic, just kind of pay attention to your buff bar and see what pops up, and then hover over it and read about it or whatever.
Okay.
I mean, it does depend a little bit on the class, as Oz said. Vanguards have the fewest. I would argue 3, and Guardians probably have the most, with what I would say is probably 6, if you use them properly. I wouldn't necessarily say you'd use all 7 on a on a Guardian, but yeah, probably got 7 if you really want to count. And as I said, we're not going to go into the specifics of each one, but each one pretty much going through your rotation will put up little buffs. Like for example, on a Guardian, I know Warding Strike puts up 2 buffs. I can't remember what they are. Maybe just kind of what. Yeah, there they are. So there's Warding Power, which increases your shield absorption, and Warding Strike, which is a damage reduction. Just by going through your rotations, you'll find, and that's the thing with the Vanguard, and it's the same with the Shadow, you've got to go through certain rotations to actually put up certain little buffs. They're not big, but they all add up. And then you've obviously got your big trigger DCDs, like Saber Ward or Resilience on a Shadow, things like that.
Vanguard really only has reactive shield and power yield, and then battle focus, kind of a little bit of both, I guess. Could be an offensive and defensive cooldown. And then you have Adrenaline Rush if you really need some help, but that's really about it, I think, for a Vanguard.
And obviously there's the one that everybody should be carrying as a tank, which is an Adrenal.
Correct.
Okay,
I was just going to say, and if you need any of those Adrenals, I can make them. And the blues, just a little FYI here, the blues are just as good as the purples. They're not as good, but they're pretty close. And then also, if you use the older, going back to the older, what am I trying to say here? The level 70 ones, the stems and all that we used to use then, those, I think they're polybiotic.
It's the advanced polybiotic shield adrenal MK2.
Yeah, those.
That's what I said.
Those they're good enough for flashpoints and story mode.
They're the same stats as the base Kipraks or whatever they are. Okay, going back, work as a team with the other tank. Okay, always call your taunts out before you use them. First of all, it lets everyone know that you're going to be doing it, and especially the healers, because if you've called out, you're going to be using your taunt, especially your area taunt. You're going to be taking a whole lot of damage. You may need some care and attention from you.
Sorry, Seb, I'm going to interrupt.
Go on.
On that note, Renrosh, to answer your question a little better, if you're about to pop an area taunt and you've got, you're going into, let's say you're going through S&V, and it's where all those rats are, and you're going to jump into the big one and area taunt and get them all. One, don't use it right off the bat. Don't ever lead with a taunt, but if you're going to do that and you know it, pop a defensive cooldown before you do it. Or right after. Does that make sense?
Okay.
That's a great time. That's a great time to do one.
Yeah, because you got to understand, you got everybody taking a piece out of you, so it pretty much takes your health.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, for example, that first statement that Drew kicked us off with is you're trying to get all the aggro for everything, and if you've got everything beaten on you, you're going to take some damage. But there are times like we were running DF yesterday, and just as you get to the second boss, after you got the first little bit out of the way, there's a whole load of Subteroths come in. What I do is I area taunt and reflect them, and it absolutely mullers them. They're rare, pretty much dead and buried before rare. before any of the DPS has to do anything.
Vanguards have no reflect, so you don't have that ability at all. Shadows can spec into it, but yeah.
Well, Sonic Rebounder does something, but it's not as effective.
Mm-mm.
Okay, just the last couple of thoughts on being a good tank. You will make mistakes. Yeah, nobody's perfect. The thing is to own up to them and learn from them. Yeah. And then something else that Oz is always saying is read through your skills in your proficiency tabs, and you can press K or you can press P to access those. And they tell you an awful lot about what each of those is doing.
That's actually a good tip for any class, by the way. You can really learn your rotation, but just by reading through, hit K and read through all your tree, your skill, and it'll be pretty obvious what your rotation should be by reading that. Sorry, Seb.
Okay, another question. As a tank, what do you think is going to be your most used key or ability?
You want to use your biggest threat generators. Know which ones are your threat generators. Plus, you always got the shield, so you're going to shield or guard somebody.
Okay, I'm gonna go off on a bit of a tangent here, and I was sort of trying to put in a bit of a false question. The one I would say you're going to be using the most as a tank, and it's probably what's different to a lot of the other classes, is your tab. Your tab key. You should be constantly cycling through all the mobs and hitting them with an ability to keep aggro and see if anything slipped away. That's really what I would be saying. Is I understand what you're saying. You want to get your big threat generators in early, because if they're attacking you, they're not attacking somebody else, especially the healers. And that's where I would maybe start thinking about, well, do I need to pull a taunt in or something to pull that mob off the healer? And certainly, as the off tank, that's the sort of thing that you would be looking to do. Is if the main tank's got the boss and I'm the off tank, what am I trying to do? Well, I'm not tanking the boss, so what am I trying to do? I'm trying to protect the healers. So if you see something on your healers, get them off. And that may be using your big threat generators, as Drew said, or maybe that's the time you need to put in the taunt.
Yeah, that's a good point. I try to cycle through all the time, and that's a time that if you see that somebody has aggro and you don't, and your taunts are on cooldown, then you need to let somebody know or let the off tank know that, hey, my taunts are on cooldown right now. So
yeah, and I wasn't trying to be funny with you, Drew. It was just like, it's not something that most people will think about, is to say, hey, I should be hitting my tab key all the time, and you should be. You should be literally.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I didn't.
It's not on you. If it's not on you, why is it not on you?
Yeah, totally agree with that one.
Maybe a reason, and that may depend on the op, but there may be a reason. Okay. Positioning. Where you position yourself and the boss is very important. Very important. You don't want to be. Just getting tea. You don't want to be facing the boss into the group. A lot of bosses have clears or cornels, for example, so you don't want those hitting the rest of the group. If you can get out of them as well, do so. Your healers are going to be very, very, very pleased about it. Don't stand in stupid, and those can vary in different colours, red, yellow, blue, whatever. Move, get out of them. Again, your healers are going to... As I said, positioning the boss and yourself may be very important. It's more likely in hard mode stuff than story mode, but there are occasions where it really does matter. And I'm thinking about an example there, TFB Kalsara, where you need to take Kalsara away from the rest of the other two mobs, Harriet and Kaifas. So there's times when it does matter in story mode as well. One last comment on there. If a DPS wants to come and stand by you on your side of the boss, that's your problem. That's their problem, not yours. Your healers are not going to be they're not going to be very popular with your healers, because they're going to take a lot more damage than you do. They don't have the armor that you're going to have. They don't have the reflex that you're going to have. So don't turn the boss just because a DPS stands your side of the boss.
The other thing I'm going to chime in right here is
Oh, I'm sorry.
on that note, typically, and I know a lot of people don't want to tank things because, you know, Seb touched on this earlier. It's kind of like the chicken and the egg, you know. You don't want to tank because you're afraid of screwing up and getting blamed, but you need to tank and learn the stuff, and the only way to do it is by doing it. I've said this 100 times, and every time I talk about the shadow tank and all that stuff. Flashpoints, and unless you're just terrible. I mean, if you're just terrible, then get with one of us and we'll run through you. But most flashpoints, ops, they fail because of DPS, not because of the tank or the healer. I don't care what anybody says. I'll argue them to the ground on that. So go in and learn it. If you want to run with guildies, just ask. I'll go with you. I mean, if you want to tank it, I'll go DPS. I'd be glad to. I'll heal it too, if you want
Absolutely.
me to. So that's just kind of where I'm at. That's my 2 cents. Don't ever let somebody say, "Oh, the dang thing failed because of tank." No, it's because of the DPS for being dumb. And if you do pug groups, there's a lot of damn cowboy DPS that think that they know everything. Just let them pull it and get killed. Anyway.
No, it's a good point, Oz, because I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, I don't want to learn tanking because I don't want to learn in pug groups or whatever." Well, if you're afraid to do that, definitely, like Oz said, run with the guildies here. We'll help you, and we won't make fun of you when you make mistakes because we've all been there. I mean, I'm not perfect. I still make mistakes from time to time. We all do, but it's all about learning. And if you'd rather learn with people in the guild, where you can actually talk to people through Discord, than trying just trying to learn through pug groups or whatever.
You can't learn without trying. That's
absolutely.
If you don't try, you won't learn at all. Okay, we're going to keep moving because we're eating up the time here. A couple of misconceptions. Oh, God. What's it for? And the tip I would give you here is actually put your mouse over your guard and read what it's. It is not for protecting someone, right? It's going to give them 5% less damage. What it's there for is 25% less threat. It's a threat drop. Okay, so what you should be doing is putting your guard on the highest, what you think is going to be the highest threat generator. It's usually a DPS. It's usually a melee DPS, because of the way the mechanics work. They're going to generate more threat. If you're not sure who it is, wait until they pull, then you know who it is. But that's what guard is for. It's not to protect people. It is a threat. It's for helping you keep the threat. There are times when you might put it on a healer, and certainly I can think of one off the top of my head is as we transition into the second phase on the last boss in TFB, going up into the platforms. Switch your guard from whatever DPS you've got onto your healers, because they're going to be pulling the threat by that stage. Another misconception: taunt. Taunt is not an opener. Do not ever open with a taunt. Taunt is the same principle as threat drop's the same. It's a multiplier of threat. Okay, so the higher percentage of, I think melee's 110% versus 104 for ranged, and that's why you most likely put your guard on a melee DPS. So if no one has done any damage, they've generated no threat. So if you multiply 0 by 0, you'll get exactly 0 threat. So do not open with your taunt. And this is what Drew was saying: is open with your highest DPS threat abilities, and that varies from tank to tank. I know on a shadow force pull, and the same with Vanguard with your harpoon. They're good threat generators. Saber throw generates a little bit on a guardian, but not very much. So you've got to think about, well, what are my highest generators. Go through your rotation of your openers, and And only then, if you need to use your taunt, you use your taunt. If you don't need to use a taunt, don't use it. Because people will hear me say it. Having your taunt still available right now is better than I just used it and then somebody pulls it off.
Yep. I'm going to interject right there if I can, Seb. There are times, though, that you are better served, especially once you get to know the fight a little bit, you're better served mixing your taunts into your rotation. And one I can think of off the top of my head is, like Seb was saying, we did DF last night. The first boss of DF, 2 tanks are stacked right on top of each other so they can kind of mitigate each other's damage, whatever. Seb and I feather our taunts in over and over and over just to make sure we're on the top of the threat table. Another one that'll do that is Bulo. You have to do that. But moreover, we did an S&V 16-man hard mode a couple nights ago, and I was soloing Thrasher, and the DPS was ridiculously high, and so was our healing. And I just felt compelled that if I'm gonna have a chance here, I've got to feather my taunts in, and I did. And nobody pulled off me, thank goodness. But you kind of got to balance it out, is what I'm saying. In a flashpoint, probably gonna be okay. But if you're in an op with, 16-man op, and you're solo tanking a boss, and the other tank's up chasing ads around, and you've got, 6 top-tier DPS that you're worried about, you better feather them in. That's all I was going to say. And the DPS need to be dropping their threat, too, at appropriate times. But that's a different conversation. Sorry, Seb, go ahead.
Yeah, 16-man certainly is harder to keep threat in, I think, than 8-man if you've got a lot of big hitters in. Because you've only got, with 2 tanks, you've only got 2 guards, and that's not going to go around 6 people. But just coming back to taunts, the best cooldown that I know of is on a single taunt is 12 seconds, and an area is 40 seconds. That's a long time to wait if you just used it on something and then somebody pulls it. That's 12 seconds minimum before you can pull that back on. And the key thing to remember in your opening rotation, the more DPS you do, the more threat you generate. And I would actually say to you, a challenge is to do a complete fight, or op, even, without using a single taunt. It is possible. It is possible.
Yeah, and if you go ahead and look at your, hover over each item, it'll tell you, it'll say this item or this, thing is generating a higher amount of threat. So kind of read and learn goes back to what Seb was saying about, learning the rotation and looking at each individual, thing you're.
So the key, use your taunts at appropriate times. Never ever taunt off the other tank unless you have to, unless it's a tank swap. What's the point in taunting off another tank when he's got aggro? Yeah. What's the point? Keep your taunt till you actually may need to use it. And also, again, on that, be careful with your big threat generators when the other tank is kiting the boss. Right, okay, a couple of things to add to your interface. Oz, do you want to talk through this?
Yeah, sure. So the biggest thing, make sure you have target of target on. And every class I play, DPS, healing, whatever, I have target of target. It just lets you know who has aggro. I mean, period, end of story. You can put it right above. I usually keep it right above my own health. And yeah, sometimes I just use that. I do use focus target. You have to go to interface editor to make sure it's enabled. You got to go to preferences, control, general, and then you'll be able to target the other tank with that. So if you press, it's Alt F, right?
Yep, Alt F.
The biggest thing about focus target. Oh, sorry. You need to also make sure you have your focus target cast bar enabled so that you can see when the boss is challenged. The biggest thing with that, and the one fight I can think of off the top of my head where it's crucial, is if you're doing Dread Palace, and probably more so in hard mode than story mode, but still you could do it in story mode too if you did the mechanics correctly. But there's a tank swap, right? There's a lot of fights that have tanks. in Dread Palace, you can't tell what the other tank is doing because if you've got 2 of those monsters on you, that's all you can see. Your whole screen is consumed by a freaking monster. So if you have your focus target up, you can watch that and see when the boss is channeling something and when you need to tank swap. You can also see the stacks that your other tank's getting. You'll hear Seb say, well, hey, Oz, we're going to swap at 2 stacks, or we're going to swap at 5 stacks. If you're watching that focus target, you'll see when those stacks are coming up. The other thing I do is I turn up the debuff scale on the focus target and on myself. So I know right away if the boss has put some poo on me that we got to swap and it's ticking, and all of a sudden I'm at 1, 2, you can see it big time. The other thing I do on my interface with my tank, and I do this on my DPS too, but I reduce the ops frame size. So I make it pretty small because, honestly, if you're watching your focus target and your target of target, you don't need an ops frame that's taking up your whole screen like you would if you're a healer. If you're healing, you need a big ops frame, in my opinion. Anything I forgot there, Seb?
Well, what's helpful for me to add on to what Oz was talking about is I have different frames for, like, I have a DPS frame set up.
Correct.
I have a tanking set up, and I have a healer set up. So if I make a second healer, I can just copy that and have that. But I do have my ops frames, and my entire screen layout is different for all 3 classes, because like you said, there's some things you don't need to see as a tank, and some things you don't need to see as a DPS, and some things you really do need to see. So if you guys ever want to pick my brain or whatever, feel free to ask me what I have, or ask Oz what he uses or whatever like that. But yeah, there are some things that are helpful for each different type of class you have. So
just coming back to the focus target for a second, I swap it from maybe being on the other tank to a particular fight, or to a boss in a particular fight. It's even useful, I would suggest, for a healer, in that quite often as a healer you're not even watching the boss. You've got no idea what health the boss is at because you're too busy focusing rightly on the ops frame. If you use focus target on the boss as a healer, you'll be able to see what state that boss is at. Oh yeah, is it 30%? It's going to be doing such and such in a minute. So I think focus target is a very, very useful tool. A lot of people don't use it, but I think as a tank it's absolutely crucial. Sorry, T, you're going to ask a question.
I was going to say, for you guys that set up your bars differently like that, could you actually do like a screenshot and put it in Discord?
Yep.
Because I've always wondered what other people do for their frames for, like, are they healing, are they tanking, are they DPSing, just to see how they set.
When we're done, T, I'll drop mine in there too. So.
Thank you.
Just jumping in again. So we're talking about threat. You need to generate as much threat as you can. Keeping yourself at the top of the threat table is the key goal. And that's where the use of star powers, and particularly that threat table, is absolutely crucial. It's absolutely vital to us when we're doing hard mode stuff, because as soon as you start seeing somebody coming up, that might be the time when you're going to put that taunt in that we were talking about you using or not using. And you will have heard us say as well, just keep hammering the boss. Every little bit of DPS that you're doing is A, generating threat, and B, it's helping the raid, because the more raid DPS you do, the less the rest of the raid has to. And I know Oz prides himself on trying to do as much DPS as he can on the tank.
I do, absolutely. I love looking when we're. And this is terrible to say. I shouldn't say something like this. Don't take it the wrong way if I'm offending you, but I love looking at when I'm tanking. I love looking at star parse and going, man, I just beat like 3 DPS.
I know, it's a good feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, because you can. I mean, tanks are capable of pulling a lot of DPS. I mean, not a lot. I mean, they're not gonna make 10K or whatever, but you can get close to 5, and on trash pulls, you can get up around 9.
His tanking might be shit, but his DPS is great.
That's true. That's true.
And I know what you'll also have heard say, doing nothing is the worst thing you can do. Throwing a taunt, as long as it's appropriate, but spam your basic attacks, stun, adds, but do something. Be doing something to the group. Might be the odd time in hard mode where you're specifically waiting for something to happen, but not often.
I want to caveat on that, Seb, because this comes up a lot in our group. There's some, even in story mode. DP is the one that's in the top of my mind, but there's other ones too. My dog is pro squeaky. There are times where even as a healer or a DPS, you need to know what your hard stuns are. So your things like cryo grenade and force stun. Some of those ads channel things that can't be interrupted, but you can hard stun them and they don't get the channel off. So no matter what class you're on, especially if you're on a tank, make sure you're using those, because A, if you hard stun an ad, you're not going to lose aggro to it because it's freaking stunned. And B, it's not going to get its channel off, which helps the raid. So just FYI.
Okay, next thing, tank swaps. You've heard us talk about these, and being perfectly honest, there probably aren't that many of them in story mode ops. A lot of the story mode ops we do, you can single tank them, but there are a few bosses, and I'm thinking of the first boss in TOS, Malafar, where he puts the big puddle down, and you've got a tank swap in that, and that is something where, when we're talking about the focus target, that is something where I would have Oz targeted. I'd watch his stats coming up. Yeah, he's at 4. Right, okay, I am going to just wait and maybe do nothing for a second, waiting for his stack to get to 5, and then I'm instantly in and picking it up. So there's a few, but not many. But if you ever start doing hard modes, they're everywhere. They're absolutely everywhere, and there's not many bosses that really don't have one. And as I was saying, for me, one of the best ways of managing that is you focus target, and you can see exactly what's happening to you, your tank partner, how many stacks they have, etc. etc. I'm going to move on. Interrupts and stuns. Probably one of your key roles in a raid as well, because you're going to have the boss targeted most of the time, and you can see his casts. And generally, most tanks have a decent number of interrupts and stuns, and most of them with fairly short cooldowns. I know, for example, commandos have 24 seconds, whereas yours will be 12 seconds.
I get 16 seconds.
The cooldown on Riot Strike is 10 seconds on a Vanguard.
Yeah, I think 12 seconds is the shortest that you'll find. But generally, you'll find you've got several other things that will work as an interrupt or a stun as well. It isn't just like, for example, it's force kick. I think is it spinning kick on the.
Yeah, spinning kick does one. You also have force stun. Shadows have a lot of them actually.
Yeah, sort of guardians. I mean, your leap will act as a stun. Hilt bash will on occasions, not every time. So don't.
Just FYI, Vanguards have cryo grenade, which is single target, and they have neural surge, which does 8 of them.
So the more you can do that, the more it allows the DPS and the healers to get on and do their jobs. If you need help, make sure that you're asking both before and during the fight.
Seb, can I say one more thing real quick?
Yeah, sure.
When you're doing when you hit K and you're looking at your combat proficiencies, every tank has something they can spec into that shortens the cooldown of your interrupt. So make sure when you're going through and you're picking your utility points, you pick that as a tank. For instance, I'm looking at my Vanguard right now. On the Masterful, there's frontline defense, and the first thing it says is it reduces the cooldown of Riot Strike by 2 seconds. That's your interrupt. All tanks have that. Something similar. Take it. Go ahead, Seb.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Yeah, I mean it is things like that. Having your interrupt and stuns, you're gonna. It's not solely your responsibility, but you're going to be one of the main players in making sure that you can control it. Okay, I'm going to talk briefly communicate. In Resolute, we use Discord to make it easier for the whole raid. And again, as we talked about it before, as the person starting the fight, you should probably count down, let everybody know. it's letting everybody know that what's going on, but it also allows the DPS specifically to maybe precast their ability, so that they don't have to use their instant cast. So it's important. We also use ready checks built into the game. We use those both in ops and FPs. You can only do that if you've got raid lead or you've got assistant. You can't do it unless somebody's giving you that.
There you
we
go. You don't have to ready up. I'm just messing with you.
So you need to make sure that your raid leader has given you assistant lead so you can do them. As I said. And it's just all you need to do /RC. That will get that up. But yeah, if you haven't got it as a tank, you should have it, because you're the one that should be doing the ready checks, or the group, or the raid leader. Don't then leap in if people aren't ready, because especially if it's the healer that didn't, there's a good chance things are going to go pear-shaped in very, very prompt fashion. Other key communication with your tanking partner. As we mentioned above, a lot of story mode raids don't have swaps, but hard modes do, and that's very, very vital in hard modes. Making sure that your other tank is knowing what you're going to do and what they need to do is kind of crucial. Focus target may tell you a lot of stuff, but it's not going to tell you everything. And again, keep the raid aware of the progress. The healer may not be using that focus target, aware that the boss is about to enrage or whatever, and we're going to need to pop raid buffs and all that sort of stuff. Don't overdo it. Your healer does not need to know every time you take a bit of damage, and it's the I need a heal. There's nothing to piss healers off more than constantly, I need a heal, I need it. Let them do the jobs and keep the chatter to what's required.
I need healing.
Anything else on that was? Oh, jeez.
What do you mean? What's all that about? Nope, I don't think so. I would just say that make sure you are like he said. I know when I tank with other people that I don't usually. The biggest thing that gets me is, if you're not communicating your taunts, and I don't know you're about to area taunt, and all of a sudden I lose the boss or something like that. That just communicate. And if you've run with Seb and I, you hear us doing it constantly. So onward.
You know what pear shape was us?
I need healing.
Again?
Shit. You mean the shit?
Mm-hmm. No, I just thought it was funny when you said it.
You knew what I meant. Hell in a handbag. Hell in a handbag.
I like it. I just never heard that expression before. It's good.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm not sure whether that's Aussie or English, but yeah. Not going to say a huge amount more. Build, stats, utilities, set bonus, amplifiers, tax, all that stuff. Really not going to cover that in detail here, because they're very specific to each type of tank, and we'll cover those with the specific class workshops. Initially, don't worry too much about min-maxing your gear. Just get to 3 or 6, so you can start to build your set bonus and then your tactical, and once you get there, you can start rolling for your max and man gears, and also looking at your amplifiers. Warning there, amplifiers are going to cost you a fortune, and I would say don't chase. I find the tanking ones are harder to get than some of the DPS ones, but don't chase the stats. Don't have a piece of gear with the armoring and keep on chasing it. Don't, I need to have what's the force one?
Reinforced armor is the one I use.
Reinforced.
On my
Yeah, reinforced. armor. I've got to have reinforced. I've got to keep chasing until I get the gold on that one. Don't do it. Seriously, you will go through a serious amount of money if you just start chasing it to get a specific. I do it slightly differently now. I set myself a budget of, I don't know, 25, 30,000, whatever you want to do. Once I reach that, if I haven't got a stat that's worthwhile, a gold stat, I stop. But if I do get a stat that's worthwhile, I will then take that out and put it into a Legacy Bank or a Toons Bank and keep it for later, and then I'll put it back on.
So do you look at golds as being more worthwhile to keep, or high purple?
Either one.
I go for golds personally, T, but that's. I mean, I've got something like 120, 150 different DPS golds now, and something like about 70 or 80.
I'm impressed. How big is your storage?
Huge. I mean, I have got. I know for armorings, I have a Legacy Bank completely full, and I have another Toons bank vault. One of the bank vaults completely full. So that's why I'm saying I know I've got somewhere around about 150 of DPS.
T, just to be honest, I don't chase the amplifier. I mean, I used to. I have a couple tunes that are tuned completely, like my shadow tank. To me, it's a credit sink, and it helps, but honestly, it's not going to make or break you, in my opinion.
No. I mean, to be honest, I don't actually have DPS. I don't have tanking amplifiers. Most of mine on this tune, they're actually DPS ones. I think a lot of them are armor penetration.
Is that so you can do more threat?
Yep. All goes to the DPS threat issue. Yeah. I actually, coming on to that, T, that's a good lead in. I know Oz and I are both the same, and we have two sets of gear because hopefully most people are aware of this. Unless you never do Duxon, you're going to need two sets of gear. One for Duxon because it's the only level 75 raid that you have, and you can actually then start to do what we used to do before 6.0 is I used to take all the warding mods out of my armor and put in lethal mods to get the power. Well, it's not a skank tank. It's just, again, it's about generating power, which generates DPS, which generates threat. That has now been capped in all the other ops apart from Duxon. They're all capped at 70, so it caps your power. There is absolutely no point in ripping the warding mods out. Not that defense does a great amount in the op, but it does a little bit, whereas power is capped. I can't remember what the number is, 2257 or something it's capped at.
That sounds right.
Yeah, I mean, defense above 2,400 defense rating goes up 0.0017% per 1,000 rating, but it's still better than nothing. So as I said, both Oz and I have two sets of gear, and as I said to you, don't spend a fortune on amplifiers. I mean, T's point about, if you get a decent blue, purple, that's fine. That's going to be fine. It's going to do you, certainly in story modes. I've just got to a point now where I've got so many of the things. I don't bother with purples anymore. I just wait for the go. And as I said, I have a lot of armor penetrations, but there's nothing wrong with the tank ones either. So if one of those rolled up, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Opener rotation, again, we're not going to cover those in specific here because they're specific to each type of tank. Other than to say that the key aim is to generate as much threat as possible, as quickly as possible. And that probably means doing as much DPS as you can. If you can keep threat without having to taunt, you're doing a pretty decent job. And then you can settle back into your rotation to keep your threat up. And as we've said before, it's where Star Pass. But you need everybody to be in Star Pass, and you can see them on the threat table. And that's when, such and such is coming up close, I'll put in a taunt, and I'll you're going to get that multiplier of a bigger number, and hopefully you'll keep the threat all the way through. But yeah, I would challenge you to see if you can actually manage to generate enough threat without having to put in a taunt. It is possible on a lot of places. Depends on who's in the op to an extent, but it is possible.
Another cool thing about calling out your taunts, and I don't know if it's beneficial or not to mention this. If I say throwing out an area taunt, or I'm going to say taunting the boss, as soon as those words come out of my mouth, that means I've already probably done it. So that also means that that's a great time for DPS and healers that drop their aggro. Because like Seb was saying, it multiplies. So if I taunt and y'all drop, the distance between us, it just gets crazy. So that's another reason Seb and I you always hear Seb and I say taunting the boss, area taunt, going out. It's kind of an indication to the rest of the raid, hey, now's a pretty good time for you to drop your threat.
We did hard mode DF yesterday, and on the first boss, with the two tanks stacked together, Oz and I were trade taunting, and watching the threat of the others coming up, and there was a point where I was going, not going to taunt Oz, not going to taunt, because you can see there's still a 2000k difference between my threat and the next DPS. As soon as it started closing, I'm going to put a taunt. That's how we were controlling the fight. We never lost the boss, despite having Mo, Soren, Brian, and Kiriana in there, who were all doing huge numbers on that boss. And we kept the threat all the way through because we monitored and watched. Okay, I've not got a lot else to say, other than my final thought. If a DPS jumps in before you and pulls the boss, normally the Sentinel, just let them. They probably won't last very long, and they might not do it again. To me, if DPS wants to pull threat, fine. You carry on. You can have the threat. I'll wait till you're dead, and then I'll pick everything up after that. But it really does mess the threat table up. So a DPS jumping in.
I just typed in my favorite quote into chat there so you guys can read.
I mean, and if a DPS doesn't learn it and they keep dying, hey, it's their repair bill, not yours.
I, as a healer, tend to want to let them die if they continue to do that.
Well, and there's subtleties too to it. Like sometimes, in a flashpoint that'll happen. Like freaking Sentinel just leap right. But there's other times where there's a boss and there's ads. One tank gets the boss, the other tank gets the ads. The ads got to go down first, obviously. If a DPS isn't on the correct area, in other words, they're wailing away on the boss when they should be on the ads. That's kind of something like that too, in my opinion. But I digress.
That's pretty much everything I'd got to say. So we've got about 10 minutes left before T starts achievements. So we've got a bit of time for questions if anybody's got. He said that my wife's come in, so I may be getting one externally.
I will add this: if you guys want to ever tank something and I'm on, just let me know and I'll run a flashpoint with you. I know Mo loves flashpoints, so he'll always do one. But if you guys want that, I'd love to jump on a healer and heal you.
Yeah, I heard somebody asking a question. Was it Barch?
Yeah, it was just when I go to like Volk and look at things, they recommend a lot of oral resistance. You guys didn't talk about that one.
It's fine. It's fine. That's the
AOE one.
The AOE. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it, Barch. Personally, I don't want a huge amount. I think I might have a couple. I can never remember what I've got.
I mixed mine up. Barch, I mixed mine up too.
Okay. Well, I'm not 70 yet, so I'll be hitting you up.
Yeah, no, I've got 3 of those on Barch. There's nothing wrong with that at all.
The only tanking one I think is garbage is on guard.
Yeah, Yeah, don't. It's the same. Yeah, the same with the DPS one. That it lasts for 10 seconds. Waste of time. Most boss fights are going to be way longer than that, and they don't necessarily do big damage in the first 10 seconds. So yeah, no, yeah, anything like that, forget about it. But all the things, sort of armor protection, all those ones, they're fine. Periodic resilience, yeah.
Oral resistance is kind of the catch-all.
There's a lot of stuff out there does area damage, which is what that is.
And to be honest,
Anyway.
You're gonna probably, as you're learning how to tank, you're probably gonna need more focus on your rotation and your use of defensive cooldowns, depending on what class you're on. If you're on a Vanguard, you know, no worries there really, because everything's passive. But it's rotational based, so if you're gonna die in an op, it's not because of your amplifiers.
Correct.
Certainly not in story mode. Yeah. I mean, I really wouldn't worry about your amplifiers hugely at this stage, but just get yourself up to 306, get your set, get your stats in the right place, get your set bonus, get your put your augments on. Amplifiers are the last thing to worry about, and the most expensive. Bang for buck, bottom of the list. Any other question? Okay.
Now,
I'll go.
just one quick one. In regards to like the shield and absorb like that, are they different for each tank class?
Not really. I mean, generally speaking, if you get all the way augmented, which again, you can get really close to the blues, so don't even mess with the purples if you don't want to. I always try to have twice as much shield as I do absorb. So like on this Vanguard, if you inspect my gear, I'm rolling about 5,000 shield and about 2,200 absorb. And it's about where you want to be, I think. Percentage wise, I'm not real sure what the percentages are. I don't really look at percentages.
Or 51, 52%. I run my shield and absorb a little bit books on the Guardian. Your shield should always be higher than your absorb number, though. If your absorb number is higher, then you need to swap something out, because your shield should always be higher. There's no point in absorbing something if you have a shield with it. And the defense, what I'll say about that number you can do absolutely bugger all about to an extent. I could, even if I try, and I have another set of gear, as I said, for Duxon, I cannot get it below about 3,000, something like that, 3,200. You just can't. You cannot get rid of it, short of taking stuff off that you want. Like you might sort of start changing out your implants for DPS ones. Well, you do that, you might drop your defense, but you're also going to drop your absorb or your shield, and that's just not where you want to be. So defense, you know, as I said, above 2-4, not really getting much bang for your buck, but you're at least getting something. This is power in the. Don't, yeah. Yeah, David. Yeah, I mean, there's two ways to build a tank. There's endurance, hit points. And there's mitigation, and I personally, and I think Oz is the same, and most tanks are the same. They will go the mitigation route. You know, it's better to parry, avoid, shield, whatever the damage, rather than take it and rely on your hit points. But there are tanks, and I think generally there'll be vanguards that would build that way more so.
Shadows used to. I don't know if they do anymore. They used to go really high endurance. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, so I would always take the high mitigating stat, shield, absorb, defense, whatever, versus the endurance. Sorry, I'll think for a sec. I got just one final question for you guys. Was that at about the right level for a sort of a basic?
I think it was
tanking work. Because we want to do the same for basic healing and basic DPS as well.
No, I think it was very helpful, Seb and Oz, for being a basic overview of all three tanking things. Yeah, I think it was really.
And I'm not. There'll be some of you here that's. Yeah, you knew it all, or you knew 99% of it, or whatever, and that's fine. But as a sort of a basic, is this the right level? So yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah, I think it was real good. So.
Yeah, it was good. A lot of the basics I knew, and then there's just some things like, geez, I don't always think I hit that tab all the time. So. Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
hopefully you picked up one or two tips, and and as I say, we're going to close it off here because T's going to be rolling in a minute or two. But anytime you've got any questions, feel free to whisper or talk to us and myself and drag us down into the workshop and have a chat. And there's others people that are here that are pretty damn good. Pretty good damn tanks. I mean, I know Cloud's tanked some of the hard mode stuff with a hard mode team, and Mo's a pretty decent tank, and Drew here's a pretty decent tank. But yeah, I mean, we talk through ideas as well. Oz and I are always talking about, does this work or does that work? Or so yeah. Thanks everybody for your time, and we'll be handing over to T.
Woohoo!
Woo!